Welcome to They Live by Film, a platform dedicated to bringing you film discussion and interviews from around the world. I'm Adam Lundy, joined as always by my co-hosts Chris Haskell and Zach Bryant. Hello, guys. How are you doing?
Hey,
Hello.
how's it going?
Man, I'm doing well, but I think Zach, most importantly, how are you?
I'm okay. For anyone here, I got COVID on Monday, so at least that's when I was diagnosed with COVID was on Monday. So I've been kind of feeling the recovery part of that, and hasn't been too bad, I guess, in comparison to what it could have been.
How did any bad take you have on this episode we can blame on COVID now?
I don't have bad takes, so it's fine.
It's funny. I got COVID at the start of the year, around sort of February-ish time, and it kind of sucked for a few days, and then I got over it and I recovered, and then about 3 weeks afterwards, I got the worst flu I've ever had in my life, and it wasn't COVID. As I did multiple tests, but it was like the worst flu ever. It was actually worse than COVID. So there was like a 5 week period where like 4 out of the 5 weeks I was just horribly ill with different ailments.
No,
Um,
so like it's what you're saying is so true. Okay, so we've had friends that have like under 40 that have died from COVID. So I'm not trying to minimize it, especially when it was at its peak. But there's this whole discussion right now around giving the vaccine to your kids, and I don't think we're going to do it because, our 5-year-old, his entire, well, almost his whole class had it. He had 15 kids in his class and 12 of them got it. And the most they were ever sick for, like symptoms wise, was 3 days. And luckily he never got it. I don't know how, somehow we've avoided it. But like, I don't know. I mean, we have the vaccines and the boosters and all that. Like, go do it, and if you want to have your kids do it, I'm fine with that. I'm not trying to make a stance here, but when we look at the 3 days kind of with minor symptoms, maybe like 100-degree fever for a day or two, I don't know that I'm ready to give him a vaccine just yet. We'll
Yeah,
see what happens.
I would have never guessed Chris was an anti-vaxxer. That's all I got from the entire story.
No, I've missed work 3 different times because my body reacts violently to that vaccine. But when it's, yeah, like it's something about, I don't know, doing that in your kids, it's like, now we'll see what happens if he winds up getting it. He'll be the one that gets it severe and I'll be regretting it. But I think we're going to hold off for at least a year just to let it kind of mature in the marketplace a little bit. So
I mean,
there's,
it's definitely like interesting because there isn't a lot like there's testing obviously, and it was important that it come out as quickly as possible, but it's not to the extent of like what we know about polio or
yeah, 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 yeah.
mumps or anything like that. I think that when I look back to my parents talk about it, like my dad, his sister actually had polio. My parents are super old, in case anyone's curious. Like they're very
Mhm.
much older. And then my mom had mumps and measles. So, when it was time for us to get vaccinations, that's all they could think about. Like, yeah, if there's a needle that it exists, go ahead and stick it with them. Like, don't even worry about it. Doesn't matter. We're not going to research any of it. Just throw it in there.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
And I
yeah.
get, I get it when you've lived through it. It's like, yeah, I understand.
Well, yeah, I have to be real careful we don't make this into something that's going to piss off half of our listeners. But isn't polio like coming back in pockets of California, like different pockets of the world? Like people are getting polio again or something?
I've heard there's some cases where it's come back, yeah, and I mean that's the same thing with I can't
Is it
think of
smallpox?
whooping cough was another one.
Whooping cough? It's
Yeah,
crazy. Think
uh,
about these things. Yeah, it's crazy. He
yeah.
definitely got all those shots. But anyways, not to make it too political here.
yeah, let's steer away from political stuff and let's talk about how much we all hate the police. Um, No, no. But we do have we will have some controversial takes, but of the movie variety a little bit later on.
Yeah.
We'll save that for a bit of a treat. Today's episode is going to be all about horror movies. Obviously, it's that season, like we discussed last episode, it is that season for horror movies. You've had a few sort of horror centric episodes so far this month, and we're not going to stop here. This will be the last episode of October. So we're going to sort of go off again with a horror bang before we move into November. So just before we get into the two films we're going to talk about today, guys, anyone want to highlight anything they've seen recently that they thought was good, or any pickups you got recently?
Well, I'm happy to go, but Mine might take just slightly longer. Zach, you want to go first, or?
No, you're good. You can go first.
Okay, so I'll be as quick as I can. It just have you all ever had those days where all the sales orders, like I guess the post office worked together and they all came in the same day?
Yeah,
Like
every
I
once in a while.
yeah, I don't know what happened. Like I just got literally I got three pickups from the Criterion sale. I got Lost Highway, I got a Wang movie, Chan is Missing, and then I got the full Jean Vigo. So that was that came in, and then I also got the shipment from Terracotta that came in overseas with a movie from 88 Films, On the Run, a movie from Eureka, or the at least a set from Eureka, the Angela Mao set, and then a set from Third Window Films, which was the second Nobuhiko Obayashi set that they've put out now. So I love that the director of House is getting some love from Third Window Films. They have 7 or 8 of his movies out now,
That looks
which
like a
is
nice
great.
set.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's pretty. Well, yeah. That's the crazy thing to me about Third Window Films is that that guy Adam does most of everything, including I think he even did the graphic design for this set. Um, like the dude is crazy talented as a producer of discs. Um, but then the big one that I got in, I kept it small on a lot of these sales. But the one that I did because I don't know if y'all took part in the Scream Factory sale that just or the Shout Factory sale that just happened, Spooktober or something.
I didn't, but was it more than 5% this time?
Yeah, no, that's the crazy thing, right? That like there was some Blu-rays on there for like $5,
That's
$6.
actually, yeah, that's actually a good. So I'll be honest, I haven't looked in years because I'm just always kind of disappointed when I see
No, I hate
information like
this
that.
is I've been like hardcore collecting in the second round of collecting for like 3 years now, and this is the only sale of theirs I've done. Same reason, right? But I got RoboCop 2 and 3. The Vincent Price collections that they've been putting out were only I forget what they were, like $20 or something for 4 movies.
Yeah, they're
Um,
great, and those are great sets too. I have all three. They're awesome.
yeah, yeah. And then I got the It's Alive trilogy because I need to revisit those. And then they put out a Larry Fessenden box, which is cool. We talk about Ty West a lot on here. Ty West was an intern for Larry Fessenden.
I love Larry Fessenden. I'm always happy when I see him in some random movie.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He's great. He's great. But anyways, that's what I've been doing collecting wise. And then watching this whole week, I was watching all the stuff that we're going to talk about today. I had to watch like 5 movies for this episode.
On the
But
other
yeah,
end, I had to watch Zero.
nice. Yeah, I bet. I imagine. All right, what about you, Zach? What have you been watching?
um, Buying wise, actually was I had pre-ordered Halloween Ends the Savi. They had like two steel books, but they actually didn't realize that I forgot Savi doesn't like charge as soon as you pre-order. It actually waits until it ships, which is surprisingly nice. So I was like, oh well, this kind of helps my budget a little bit. So I
Hmm.
was like, at first I was like, let me look at Vinegar Syndrome. I'm gonna go ahead and see if I can buy a few things that's been on my list for a while. And then somehow I can't even explain. I ended up on Severin. So ended up actually buying three things from Severin, which will hopefully be here tomorrow. I bought their 4K of The Changeling,
Yeah.
which is supposed to be out officially on Tuesday, I think, but I should have it tomorrow. Don't Go in the House, which I've never seen, sounded pretty cool though. And then Cannibal Man, which I love that
Nice.
movie. It's fantastic. It ended up being a pretty good price. I'm sure they'll have a better sale next month than I could have just waited, but oh well. That's kind of been my main purchases, so hopefully I'll be able to check them out tomorrow. And watching wise, I've just it's been a lot of horror for obvious reasons. But I rewatched Ravenous. Have you guys ever seen that?
Nope.
Mm, no.
It's a horror western that came out at the end of the 90s. Whereas like Guy Pearce, it has David Arquette, Robert Carlyle. It has a great cast to it. But it was kind of nice because I'd seen it years ago, and it was one of those ones that was really nice to revisit because I remember just kind of thinking it was okay, and then it was one of those rare ones that just clicks with you like the second time you watch it. So that was a
Mhm.
lot of fun. I think because the first time I watched it, I really didn't think it was going to be like this dark comedy, and I think I was more prepared for that the second time, and I was a lot more into it because of that. I think the first time I was like, oh, I was kind of hoping this was going to be like a serious Wendigo movie, and it is. I mean, it plays itself pretty straight, but it definitely like uses music that's well not should be in the scenes, but it feels very intentional. But yeah, that's kind of been mine. Anything for you, Adam?
Sorry, really quick. When you Google search Ravenous,
Mhm.
the review that comes up from Rotten Tomato, I thought this was the official description, but it's just the review that happens to pop up. Ravenous is a stupid black comedy set in the same place and same year, but a more Western version of Night of the Living Dead. Anyways, I do want to see it. The cast is stacked. Sorry, go ahead, Adam.
No pickups from me at the moment. I will be getting the Criterion Lost Highway when it comes out here next week. It doesn't come out here until till the 30th, so I'll be picking that up then. Like you, Zach, just been watching a lot of horror this month, obviously. One that I kind of liked the most from the last week or so since we last spoke, when I gave a big list of things that I watched, was a really famous horror that I'd never seen before, but everyone else has, Poltergeist from Toby Hooper. I didn't expect it to be as fun as it was. Like they could have very easily made this into a horror comedy, just with some tweaks, because there's a lot of like tongue in cheek and kind of humorous moments throughout the film. It's almost like I kind of walked away from it thinking this is kind of like National Lampoon's Haunted House. You could definitely like supplant the cast with like the cast of like, you know, the Griswolds with like Chevy Chase and stuff. You could very easily just change those cast members and it becomes a comedy film. But it does have a lot of really effective moments in it as well. I really enjoyed it. Me and Neve watched it together. She liked it as well. So that's kind of like the best horror movie that I've seen in the past week or so, apart from the two that we're going to be talking about shortly.
Well, and you talk about it being almost like a comedy. That's kind of Hooper in a lot of ways, right? Like the borderline on it being so absurd, it's kind of funny. Like even when you take like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where he intended for it to be a comedy, because it gets so over the top, and I think it goes the other way and becomes terrifying. But I think that's just kind of him in a nutshell.
Yeah, there's just not there's just a lot of nice little sort of visual things that happen, and even just kind of subtle things like how in like Poltergeist they like subtly reference that the eldest daughter is a bit of a slut throughout the movie, like when she knows exactly what Holiday Inn they're going to, and the mother kind of does like a bit of a double take, like wait, why do you know this hotel? Yeah, there's just a lot of little like just subtle things throughout the film, that I thought was fun, and the film is just good fun. It doesn't like even though it has like quite serious themes, it doesn't take itself too seriously. I could definitely see Spielberg's influence, on it as well. There's a lot of rumors that he basically co-directed the film, or
and if you want me to rant about that rumor, I definitely can, but I don't know if we want this podcast to be like 3 hours.
Yeah, long. We don't want to. Maybe for another time. But his influence can be felt. I'll go as far as that anyway. But I digress. We'll move on to our actual sort of feature presentations for this episode. So I chose two films from a sort of similar enough time frame. They were made 3 years apart. One of them was in 1960, the other was in 1957, and I chose them for one specific reason. And then as I rewatched them this week, I realized I actually unconsciously linked them in another way as well. So they're both films. This is the obvious reason why I chose them, was that they both kind of deal with the ideas of witchcraft and Satanism in a sort of modern world. They're not like folk horror in the same way that something like The Blood and Satan's Claw would be. They're very much sort of set in the modern world or the contemporary world, but they deal with these sort of witchcraft, Satan worshipping themes. So that was why I thought they'd be a good pairing. But then as I watched them both, I realized that both films, they're horror films, but they also have a lot of noirish elements to them. They're almost like horror noirs. I don't know if you guys got that vibe as well.
Yeah, I was gonna make fun of you for that. I was like, on a horror week, you still managed to get into noir films.
Yeah, and I swear it was unconscious because I didn't really remember them properly, because it's been over a year since I've seen both of these films, so it wasn't something that initially stuck with me. And it was only when I was watching City of the Dead, and it's very horror-y for the first half, but then it kind of goes a bit film noir in the second half. But the second film, is a lot more on, in your face with the noir elements. But we'll get into that as each film comes up. So I've already name dropped it now, so we'll start with this one. The City of the Dead. I think it was marketed originally as like Horror Hotel or something stupid like that in the
Mhm.
US. It was made in 1960 by a guy called John Llewellyn Moxey, who didn't really have much of a career. This seems to be like one of the few kind of feature films he made. Just to give a kind of brief synopsis, a young college student arrives in a sleepy Massachusetts town to research witchcraft. During her stay at an eerie inn, she discovers a startling secret about the town and its inhabitants. So this was, like I said, this is my second time watching this film. Zach, I know that you've seen it as well. Chris, I think this was your first time watching this. Is that right?
For everything today, yeah, first time
Perfect.
for all the things today.
Do you want to jump in with your initial thoughts?
Yeah, sure. So, okay, let me just switch back over here. So, the City of the Dead, aka Horror Hotel, um, they shoot zombies, which is that list that we're talking about all of a sudden a little bit more in October now. um, it has this as the 381st best horror film of all time.
Yeah, I can
And
accept that.
yeah, it's hard for me to know when you start getting into like genre. It's, top 1000 means something different, I think, than every film ever made. um, but they shoot pictures is a little less kind, has it as 8289, so 8,289. This John Owen Moxey. I was curious how I've never ever heard of this guy before, like at all. And he was a big TV director, it seems. So I don't know if this was his only feature film or just did a few, but he has like 100 credits or something on TV. So he's kind of a TV guy. But anyways, so yeah, Horror Hotel was okay. I like the fact that it was 75 minutes. It's interesting. I've been going through the this Christopher Lee box set from Severin, the Eurocrypt of Christopher Lee, the first one. So I've been seeing a lot of Christopher Lee in the last 2 weeks or so. So I was kind of happy to be seeing this. And I think the things that I liked about it the most were the creepiness that came in. I think they did. I was almost thinking of this as like it would be a great watch with Wicker Man or something, like the original Wicker Man.
Yeah.
It just has a good kind of creepy vibe. I think they set up atmosphere well. And I think that the ending, whatever, 20 minutes or so, definitely kind of pulled this in for me and made it a film I liked a lot. But yeah, what about y'all?
Yeah, that was the creepiness is definitely something that struck me when I first watched it, and again when I watched it, last week. Um, the aesthetics, the cinematography, the mise en scène, whatever you want to call it, it's just incredible in this film. It looks so good. The way they designed the sets and just the way they sort of cast light and shadow is just really, really engaging, really startling. Um, I thought of this during the week that I thought it might be funny to ask you guys. Which budget do you think was bigger? The budget for Sun Cream on Fat Girl or for Smoke Machines, this film?
These are the hard-hitting questions.
Yeah, there's a lot of fog and smoke in this
I mean, are we
film.
accounting for inflation or is it straight numbers?
That's
No,
a
but
great question.
yeah, like I really, really love this film. It was just one of those sleeper watches that I just came across randomly on Shudder. I was putting together a watch list on Shudder when I first got the service a year ago, and I was just looking for like sort of old creaky horror films, as I like creaky horror films, like 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. That's I like those films a lot, including the films of the director we're going to talk about later. And I knew nothing about this film going into it, and it just blew me away. Just the visuals blew me away. I think the story is kind of interesting, how the plot is put together. So this film came out in 1960. If I was to ask you guys, what's the most famous film that came out in 1960? What would you say?
I'm glad you're going to steal my talking point.
I'm glad someone else picked up on it. Go on, put listeners out of their misery. What's the most famous film from 1960?
It's definitely Psycho.
Psycho. Why does this film have so many plot beats that are similar to Psycho?
Now I haven't read the book Psycho, so I don't know if like that was prevalent enough to where like, ooh, that's a good idea to kill off the your main character a third of the way through the film, but
Yeah,
it was interesting, right? And I wouldn't have thought much of it if it wasn't the sibling comes to investigate right after.
exactly.
Like,
Yeah. That's the whole thing. It's we have the blonde. She ends up in a creepy hotel. She gets dispatched by the owner of that hotel a third of the way through the film when you think that she's the lead. And then a man has to come and try and, figure out what's happened to her afterwards and also travels to the same location. It's just like the exact same plot beats as Psycho.
and they came out. I think I looked it up. I swear they released in theaters the same month.
That's insane.
I
That's
think they
crazy.
both released in September. And they're both. I guess Psycho's can still considered a British production, isn't? Is it not? I can't remember.
No, that's definitely American because
Okay.
it was produced by the same people who had done all those films up until that point. Because the reason why Psycho is in black and white is because
Right.
they didn't want to finance it, and he had to use his crew from his TV show Alfred Hitchcock Presents.
That's right.
So
That's right.
yeah, that was definitely still an American production. I actually don't know if The City of the Dead is a British or an American production because obviously it takes place in America, but
It's filmed in Britain.
it was filmed in Britain. I
it was
thought I
filmed in
saw
Britain.
it was in that studio. Is that they did the Hammer films? Is that right?
Yes, but yeah, I don't. Yeah, I don't think this isn't a Hammer production, but I do
No.
think they used a lot of their stuff.
Yeah,
It looks
I
that
thought I
way too.
recognized that. Yeah, I
19
thought I recognized the studio name.
Something was going on with children that were born in the 30s and 40s though. 60s, 1960 specifically was a crazy year in horror.
Because you got
Like
Peeping Tom that year too.
Peeping
Yeah,
Tom,
Peep Tom
Yeah.
same year. Yeah.
you had Baba's Black Sunday,
Mhm.
13 Ghosts, Village of the Damned, Eyes Without a Face, which we talked
Yeah.
about on here, and then this one. So, anyways, yeah, and also I think was this the year of Charlie Brown's Great Pumpkin,
I don't know. I
which is the
couldn't
The
scariest one of
real,
all of
yeah,
them.
I said the one that really changed horror forever.
It might have been later, but
But it is
Yeah.
interesting because I mean the 60s always 1960 feels like the perfect place of where horror really changes like
Mhm.
significantly. 70s is obviously gets a lot of the but everything that the 70s did got influenced here because you had your like you mentioned you had Bava, you had Hitchcock, kind of setting up a lot of the stuff that would kind of become part of you guys are better with wave stuff, but Hollywood New Wave really starts in the 70s, right?
Yeah, exactly. New Hollywood is in the 70s, the kind of first branch of filmmakers who kind of grew up studying film.
But we talk about Night of the Hunter as being this outlier for the 50s and
Yeah.
how almost ahead of its time it was. And I feel like that type of movie, like the themes in Night of the Hunter are so horrifying.
Mhm.
And the way that they tell that story is so horrifying, but it's still in that sort of 50s feeling. Like it still feels like a 50s movie. And I think this is the thing I feel is interesting about a lot of the early 60s movies is they still have that kind of old Hollywood or old style of filmmaking vibe and feel to them. And a
Yeah,
lot
you,
of it's
you don't
shot on a
really
lot.
yeah, you don't really get that changeover until Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah.
A lot, like you said, a lot of it's still very like you look at this film, you look at like Mario Bava films, they're very much all still on studio lots, with fake backdrops and everything. And I love that aesthetic. I love that vibe of fake backdrops and things like that. That's why I enjoyed. We watched Frankenstein, obviously, for the film club
Mhm.
this week over on Criterion Conversation, and I made Neve sit down and watch it with me, and I was just gushing the whole time at all the backdrops, even though like they're so fake looking. I just love that aesthetic.
Yeah.
And I love when films do that, and obviously City of the Dead does that as well, in this kind of fake, sleepy New England village vibe they have going on.
Yeah. And in full transparency, it always takes me a minute to kind of get into that because I don't love the studio vibe as much. The obvious backdrop, like the feeling that it's everything is set up as like a set. It always takes me this one it took me a little bit longer to get into, but it's a good movie will trump I think any reservations you have about it in the first 15 minutes, right? I think this is one that won me over because it's cool the way they tell the story, and I think it's interesting the way that they like commit so much to the what do they call it? The not what's the holiday that they what are the something Eve.
Um,
All Hallows Eve.
no.
No.
Walpurgis or something like that. Walpurgis night or something.
Anyways, yeah, whatever that is,
Yeah.
the way that they commit to that night and the importance of it, was very cool. I thought it made it creepy.
Kind of going towards the set stuff. I think the reason, and I don't know if yours is the same reason, Adam. I think the reason it's always been like something I've loved, I'm just like you, is because it feels like the perfect thing for Halloween. Like when you go and look outside and you see people who set up their own like little tombstone stuff, and they set up their own little
Yeah.
sets, and there's this very Halloween feel to everything. Like I love Universal Monsters, but it's something I watch mostly in October. I don't usually watch them all year round or anything, but it has that feeling to it. Like, during the day, you're just home, it's October, you throw it in, and it just feels weirdly right to watch it then. Um, and I think that's could be looked at as part of nostalgia too, because a lot of that was stuff I watched very young. But I think these are just, I love this film for that, even though I guess that's kind of the end of that sort of thing for the most part.
Yeah.
If I can't think of anything later that would have had that.
Yeah, no, I'm the same in terms of like that aesthetic. I can't either. Like I was surprised when I first sort of looked this film up after when I finished watching it. Like I was surprised it was made in 1960. I would have placed it 10 years earlier than that.
Yeah.
Kind of early 50s. But yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying, Zach, in terms of like, the fake gravestones, the cardboard cutouts you'd have like in your front yard, and what you see in this film are kind of similar aesthetically. I never would have put two and two together, but now that you say it, it makes total sense. Um, and I'd agree, this is the kind of film, like these are the kind of horror films that you watch around that season. Like I don't think I'd be sticking this on, in April. um, Whereas there's other kinds of horror movies you can just kind of watch all year round. But for these kind of old style, I'm not going to say old because this is obviously this is 30 years after Frankenstein and Dracula. So I'm not going to lump this in, but kind of old style horror films definitely kind of, they match the vibes of October.
So this had what's the dollar to dollar equivalent of $450,000 budget. So this was also a pretty tight budget. It was 45,000 back in the day. But I think that's, if you're gonna make, one thing I do love about a lot of these low budget horror films is if it's done right, you kind of lean into the atmosphere, right? And I think they knew what they were working with, and they had someone like Christopher Lee to go help choose scenery, and then the amazing woman actress as well, who was it Patricia Jezel? Was that the one, the kind of main woman with the tied back hair, Mrs.
That's it. Yeah, the one who's playing the witch, Elizabeth
Yeah,
Selwyn, and then
yeah,
her new name, Mrs. Newless, which is just
yeah,
Selwyn
yeah,
all
yeah,
mixed up. Love that.
yeah. She was awesome, and her and Christopher Lee, I think, really carried this, the tone wise.
Oh yeah, for sure. Look, if you need a creaky villain, and yeah, if you need a creaky villain who's going to choose scenery, and Vincent Price isn't available, then you go to Christopher Lee. I think Christopher
Mhm.
Lee maybe is a bit more stoic. So I suppose it depends which way you want to go. If you want someone to be a bit more kind of wahaha kind of evil, then you go with Vincent Price. If you want someone who's just going to stand in a corner and give you wide eyes and creep you the fuck out, then you go for Christopher Lee. He's just one of the iconic sort of villain, monstery, whatever horror actors, along with Karloff and Lugosi. You have to put Christopher Lee in that category as well, because he's just so good at playing that kind of wide-eyed, stoic, sort of evil character.
Yeah. I know this is gonna sound weird, but I almost view him it to horror analogous to like what you would say like a mime is to physical comedy or something. Like he has so much control of his body.
Mhm.
Like going through this Christopher Lee set, that's one thing that really popped out is like his posture and like the way that he holds his body and like just everything he does with his kind of face and framing. Like it's pretty impressive actually. He's quite a physical actor. So I think it helps so much because they just like there's a scene in one of these movies I was going through where he has to kind of like walk upstairs, and he has his cape on, and it looks like he's floating, but it's just the way that his like the top half of his body doesn't move, and it's like his legs are moving somehow, but
This
he
is a
just
great
like
thing. This is a great thing
yeah.
for you to bring up, actually, because there's a moment. I don't know if you're kind of thinking this. Maybe this is the moment you're thinking of, and just kind of backwards. But when he's first introduced to when in his Dracula movie, when we first kind of meet him as you enter Castle Dracula, and he
Mhm.
comes down the stairs, it looks like he's floating down the stairs. He's
Yeah.
so maybe I don't know if that's the moment you're thinking of, but that's definitely how it feels when in his Dracula movie where he's Dracula, he like glides down the stairs almost, when he's first
No,
introduced.
different movie, but same exact thing. And I think it shows here, every time he speaks, it's like even if they're not showing his whole body, he just has this ability to kind of draw the attention in the scene, right? Just the way
Mm.
that he stares and like his command of the word, like the dialogue. I don't know. It's different. Like it sets it apart. And I think it makes every scene better.
Yeah, I think he's very similar to Karloff because obviously everyone talks about Karloff at Frankenstein, where he doesn't obviously talk, coherently anyway. But in a lot of Karloff's other films where he does talk, he definitely has that same kind of that same kind of
Hmm.
way of talking and way of delivering lines. And I've just read a bit of trivia about this film that that's very interesting because apparently the script was originally written as a pilot for a TV series starring Karloff. So um,
Uh,
I guess we're not the only ones maybe see the connection between those two.
I, Actually, it does. That makes sense though, because this is a TV person, right? Like this is he spent his whole career in TV. So
Mm,
with
yeah,
this and what's the other movie that we were talking about recently that Lynch did, where it was meant to be a TV show? And it got
Mulholland
Mulholland
Drive.
Drive.
there you go. Thank you. A chance to bring Lynch up into every conversation.
Yeah, I think we're 2 for 2 on movies that were supposed to be TV shows being good.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Yeah, that's the format. Set it up like a TV pilot.
Yeah. So, in lieu of of collection corner this week, we decided to do something a little bit different. So recently, when I say recently, literally in the last week or so, we got the release of the third film in David Gordon Green's Halloween sort of sequel trilogy with Halloween Ends. As listeners may know, if they're sort of caught up with their Halloween news, the reception was divisive to say the least.
Hmm.
It seems to be a very, very Marmite film. A lot of people are really loving it. A lot of people are really hating it. Even more so to how divisive Halloween Kills was last year. So we thought it'd be fun. Obviously, me and Zach have been watching these as they've come out. Chris hadn't seen any of them. So we decided that we were just going to talk about all of them. Chris did a great pleasure of watching all three kind of back to back over the last couple of days. So we just thought we'd talk about each film, just kind of give our takes, because I know that me and Zach very much disagree on a couple of them. So we just want to see where Chris kind of lies. We will kind of move through them chronologically, but we're going to end up jumping back and forth if we want to make points about certain things. And hopefully this might shed a bit of clarity on both parties as to why they kind of feel these way about these films. So we'll start with the 2018 release of Halloween, just called Halloween, but it is obviously a sequel to the 1978 original. It gets rid of the entire timeline of every other sequel apart. Only the original counts as a direct sequel to the original film. Um, this is definitely the least divisive out of all of them, in terms of like critical reception. So again, I want to get fresh eyes initially on these. So Chris, you watched this for the first time. What did you think of Halloween 2018?
Yeah, so I think it's good to start with this one. I mean, it's gonna happen with the order anyways, but I feel like this is the safest one, like
Yeah.
when they remade Star Wars Episode 7 and they
Mhm.
just kind of redid like the first Star Wars, like they redid A New Hope. Um, like this feels like this was a love story to the original Halloween movie where it's clear that David Gordon Green and Danny McBride, which still cracks me up that he's a writer for horror movies. That guy's such a goofball. But I like his comedy, but it's just funny to me that he's writing these. But um, uh, they obviously love the original franchise, so I think this was a like, let's make a movie that they felt, I'm going to assume they felt always needed to have been made. Um, so not too much to say. I liked it. I think it's if you're a fan of horror movies or just the Halloween franchise in general, I feel like you would definitely like this one. Have you all heard of any strong contingents of people that really hated this for what a reason or some reason?
Yeah, so probably the biggest contention I've seen is now Halloween has a good habit of liking to hit the reset button. Things
Mm-hmm.
get weird, they're hitting the reset button. That's just how it's always
Mm-hmm.
been.
Mm-hmm.
But it's always reset back to the same place, Halloween 2. Now, to properly do this, they had to take out Halloween 2 because of really just one part of where it's confirmed that Michael Myers is Laurie Strode's brother. Um, I think they didn't really have any interest in exploring that familiar storyline, but that's such a like fan favorite. Halloween 2 is loved by so many that I think some people were just never going to be okay with 2018, and that is a complaint I see a lot. Is it's pointless if they don't have Halloween 2 because some people like it better than the first one. I find Halloween 2 a little just kind of okayish. I've
Yeah.
never been one who's in love with it. But yeah, that's kind of been the biggest knock against it from what I've seen.
Yeah, and I'm the same with Zach. I don't love Halloween 2. It's fine. I just think Michael Myers is a bit too Terminatory in Halloween 2. He doesn't really, yeah, he's not really the same Michael Myers as we saw in the first film. So I'm not too hot on Halloween 2. So I didn't mind them retconning all the rest of them. I'm absolutely fine with that. I like Halloween 2018 a lot. I find that it was updated, but it's also very respectful. So, kind of to your point, Chris, they're making what they thought would be a good Halloween movie, and a lot of that involves sort of rethreading, the plot points of the original. It's set up. Michael escapes, kills some teenagers. Him and Laurie Strode fight off. Obviously, they subvert a lot of expectations. They change a lot of things or change things around, to be kind of like a callback or a reference. And I had fun with it. I have fun with it the same way that I have fun with The Force Awakens. That's definitely like I really don't like the Star Wars sequels. But I can live with The Force Awakens because it
Yeah.
feels familiar. It feels like
Yeah.
it belongs in that universe. And
Right.
it's the same with Halloween 2018. Did it rewrite the book on horror history? No. But it's a fun update that's respectful to the original, but still, has its own charm to it as well. I think it's a very, very solid film. But I can understand why people maybe think it's too safe or whatever. But I don't really. I think that's a bit of a silly argument calling a film too safe. Like they made a good film. Why are you still complaining? They made a good, solid movie.
Yeah, and I think this was important for Green. While Green is known for his horror, I mean not his horror, but he's known for his comedy. He's kind of been a jump around a lot of different genres through his career. He started with George Washington, and he's done a lot of indie dramas, and he's done tons of comedy now. And I think this was probably kind of a good let me dip my toes into horror sort of thing. Like, if you're going to kind of go a little weird with it, like we'll talk about soon with kills and especially ends, you probably want to like kind of get yourself familiar with it. And I think that was a big part of it too, because there was always plans to do more than one, but they were kind of told, hey, make sure the first one's any good before you do more.
Yeah.
And I think that was important for them to just kind of figure out how horror works. And that's always interesting too, is when you get these guys who are from outside the realm of horror to come in and do their own take on it, because things get a little weird, but not in a bad way. Like you're like, oh, that's not real as typical as you think it would be within the genre. And I mean, obviously they like the Halloween series. There's so many Easter eggs within the whole thing. It's ridiculous the amount. Like they even got a resurrection like Easter egg in there. So obviously they're fans of the series, but still watching it and filming it are always going to be separate things. So yeah, 18. It is what it is. Like it's fun. It's well done. It was probably number 3 in my ranking until the last couple of years. So I have a very fond love of it.
Well, and just as a segue, maybe, but I mean, I think, Halloween and then Halloween Kills definitely feel like part of that same world. Like it feels like they wrote them either together or, very, very similarly like linked in the way that they told those stories.
Yeah, I think there was, I know we haven't got the Kills yet, but I think there is like this watching them back to back. The best way I tell people to watch Kills is to watch 78, watch 2018, and then watch Kills because I think you get the most out of it from that because there is like this energy that just keeps building and building and
Yeah.
building. And I think that's intentional. Um, but yeah, I don't want to get too far before we're done with 2018, but I feel like there is a good link there between them.
Yeah, like we'll jump into Kills in a second. Like the one thing that makes it harder for me to like Kills and Ends is because I feel like the ending of 2018 is just so perfect. Like we talk about allowing Laurie to have a cathartic ending, and she has a cathartic ending, and then they're like, "Oh, we better make some more films." That's one thing that makes it hard for me to enjoy Kills and Ends as much because it just makes that really fantastic cathartic ending in 2018 just kind of pointless, and it just take like that was something I loved the ending of 2018. I thought it was perfect.
I
So
do
the
think
fact
there
that the other two
is.
films exist, it just kind of it ends up taking that away from me a little bit.
I do think there is still a good sense of catharsis, but maybe not in the same way as it was like when it was its own thing. Obviously, the whole defeating evil. I mean, people have seen slasher movies; they know how this goes. I don't know how much of a spoiler any of this is, but the catharsis of of more of a familiar catharsis in the sense that she was so estranged from everyone, and it sucks to say basically the reason she was able to get a connection back to her family was because she was right all along and that someone really was going to come kill them. And that's can kind of be a weird message when you put it too much in perspective. But I do think there is that because, I think it is nice to see a little bit more of that familiar stuff as the next two films go on. And it really is set up more here in 2018 because everybody is so on edge between the three generations of Strode women.
Mm.
One thing that I do like that they kind of retconned, they allude to it in 2018, but they don't really confirm it until Kills. And this is how we can segue into Kills if we like, was actually making Laurie's connection to Michael pretty much non-existent.
It's
So
connected because she's connected, because she feels connected.
yeah, exactly. So in 2018, Michael doesn't break out and to come after. Like that's how it's always been in every Halloween sequel that Laurie Strode is in. It's Michael's hunting down Laurie because obviously they establish a family connection in Halloween 2. That's why they've always done that. They didn't have that reason for Michael to come and hunt down Laurie in 2018 because they retconned that. So the writers did a really smart thing, and rather than kind of have to try and shoehorn a reason for Michael to want to hunt down Laurie 40 years later, when they would hardly he would hardly recognize her, was they said actually let's not make Laurie as important to this in a way that's still obviously respectful to her character. She's been anticipating this whole time, but if the crazy doctor hadn't ended up driving them to Laurie's house, they would have been very unlikely to have even met each other unless Laurie had sought him out.
Yeah, and she
So
did repeatedly throughout the film too. Like she comes so close to him throughout the night, and he just walks away from her every time. Like
exactly, yeah, that's what I thought was great, and they really they really honed this down in Halloween Kills. So we can kind of move on to Halloween Kills now if we like. Obviously, Halloween Kills kind of takes plot points from Halloween 2 and Halloween 4. So they have the Halloween 2 plot point being that Laurie spends the majority of the time, or well, practically the entire time in the Haddonfield Hospital recuperating from the previous night. And then it also takes the mob aspects of Halloween 4 and kind of puts them together. So in Halloween Kills, throughout most of the time spent in the hospital, everyone's like, Michael's coming to hunt Laurie. We got to make sure, the hospital's all battened down, all this kind of stuff. And then he doesn't. He never arrives at the hospital. He never goes to the hospital at all. We find out that's not what he does. He he always just returns home. Instead, it's not about Laurie at all, which I thought was actually a really, really cool thing to do with their story. It was a retcon that I was able to get behind, because it was always going to be difficult, as I said before, it was always going to be difficult to find an organic way to get them back together without Laurie just going and hunting them down. That wasn't really going to be practical to do in Halloween Kills, because she's obviously she's a horribly injured older woman. She can't just get up, as we see that in the film. She can't just get up and go hunting them down. So this was a really good way of making the film make sense, first of all, and also making it just an interesting dynamic in the story.
But this maybe real quick, because I know, Zach, I definitely want to have you speak on this, because I kind of have a preview of your take, which I'm excited to hear more about. But this is my favorite thing about the first two films here in this trilogy, as you say. There's this idea that Michael Myers represents evil. That's been present even before this new series, right?
Yeah.
Like he's this kind of metaphor for evil, and like the fear that he brings into a community and into an individual or whatever. And so I like the way that they did this here, where they showed I think they did an excellent job in the first two movies of showing the human side of what is one possible way that the world and an individual would react to having that amount of trauma early in their life. Like, I like the fact that they made her this conspiracy theory recluse who's like training herself with guns ready. Her entire life is just getting ready for this fight, right? I like the fact that they took it in this, like, she's estranged herself from her family. Like nothing is more important to her than safety from evil, which is, if you think about that in terms of the metaphor, it's such an impossible thing to build your, like, it just leads to a poor quality of life if that's the way you're structuring your entire existence, right?
Yeah,
If all you're doing, living in fear constantly, right? Yeah, exactly. And so I think I like the way that they did that, and I like the way that they made Judy Greer's character. I think that's probably what the daughter of Laurie Strode would be like. She rejects it. She doesn't feel that fear personally. Like, there's even that comment in one of the movies where the kid's like, yeah, but like, if you think about it in terms of history, that Michael Myers isn't that bad. It's like, it's just, he killed a
Yeah, it was
couple.
in the first film. Yeah.
First one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I like that they actually kind of, even in the writing, they took this a generation away from 1978 and said that fear doesn't feel as present and as near as it was anymore. So I thought that was quite brilliant, actually.
And it's one of those things I think that has been tough for through the years of them doing many of these sequels. And there's always this sense that filmmakers always feel like they have to kind of explain Michael's evil in some way, and by doing that, it usually like lessens how scary he really is.
Yeah.
One thing I've appreciated about all three of these is how unfiltered, I guess, I don't know if unfiltered is the right word, but it's just how simple the evil Michael really is. Like, there is, you really don't get a sense of reason with anything, which I always, that's always been a problem with the other sequels, was he's going after his family. He has that thought process there. But when he goes through different, like, in 2018, they have that long take where I just kind of call it the Halloween Toon segment, where he goes through different houses and kills people. Yeah. And especially in Halloween Kills, where he doesn't really have a method to the madness beyond he's just going home. We don't really know why. Beyond that, a 6-year-old would probably want to go home, if they're mentally that way. But it's interesting because you can sit there and come up with theories of why he does things, but not necessarily understand it. And I think that was just such a good way to go about this, to kind of keep him still scary. And of course, the actor who plays Michael, James Hugh Courtney, does a fantastic job. Especially in Kills. I think he definitely gets the most to do there.
There's one thing that, just to kind of build on what you're saying, there's one thing I like about Kills. I think it comes through in Halloween a little bit, but more in Kills, where it's the murders are vicious. Like, they turn up the speed and the power of him just a little bit. they don't quite make him supernatural, but he's just, you see that viciousness in the way that he does his that he finishes his kills. And I think that is important for the way they're telling those stories. It's almost like, you know, I think we joked about trying to bring up Marvel movies in every episode. It's that same style as the way Captain America punches. It has an impact because the way they do the editing and the sound, it's like, it feels like a strong punch. And I think that I like the way that they did that here. It's just like, you can, like, I felt like there's no way this person's gonna live. Like, there's no way they're getting out of this. Like, when he comes, he like attacks.
And you know, I think it could also be looked as kind of its own version of Rob Zombie's versions of Halloween, which were very criticized for being overly brutal. And it's interesting because while I don't think it works in the zombie films, I think it works particularly well here. And there's almost like it lacks a mean-spiritedness that I think comes from zombie films. Like, it's tough to not talk about mean-spiritedness when you're talking about slasher movies and violent deaths and stuff. But I don't know. I think I don't know if it's the humor that comes across, because I do think Halloween Kills is not unintentionally hilarious. I think it has a lot of humor in it that is very much intentional to not make it mean-spirited.
Yeah, I definitely think some of it is unintentional. Tommy Doyle, everything that comes out of his mouth. Yeah, I think that offset of some sort of comedic moments, but then I also think it's just not as grimy. Like, Rob Zombie's films are just very grimy. I think that's what adds to the sort of this what's the word? You know, just the goriness and the veracity of the kills. Just that griminess kind of really. It's like we talked about earlier with Texas Chainsaw Massacre, how the way it's filmed makes it so much more horrible than the actual things are, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And zombie films are kind of like that, but in a bad way. Whereas there's a lot more of a sheen and a polish to the Gordon Green movies. So I don't think they feel as mean-spirited because of that. One thing I'll say with Kills, so I didn't really care for Kills when it came out. I wasn't one of the haters. I wasn't like going on Letterboxd and rating it 1 star. I was just kind of like, nah, that was just a bit weird. And I rewatched it. I rewatched it straight after I finished Halloween Ends, because I was flabbergasted and I felt like I needed to I needed to make sense of what I just saw. So I was like, maybe there's a hint in here in Kills. So I went and rewatched Kills. I didn't hate it. I didn't love it. I think either side of the mob stuff, which I'm sure we'll have to talk about, Zach, because you wrote such a great piece about it on our website. I think either side of the mob stuff, it's just good, dumb fun. We just get to see Michael butcher people. There's nothing too much more to it than that, which I think is fine. I think a lot of people don't like this film because the small plot it does have is just very cringy. The whole Evil Dies Tonight mob stuff, a lot of people find that very cringy. I'm kind of the same, but I know that you have a very good sort of you have a good analysis for that. So I'll let you speak on that in a second. But yeah, I think Kills is just, I just think it's fine. I wouldn't, go home and write a big paper on it. I don't think there's a lot of stuff maybe to say about it. It's just, if you want to watch Michael kill some people, then yeah, go watch Halloween Kills, literally in the freaking title. It does feature one of the absolute stupidest movie deaths I've ever seen put on film, though, where he like kicks the door at the woman holding the gun and she shoots herself in the face. That is so dumb.
Amazing.
It's so stupid that it is funny. That's another moment where it's just kind of like, maybe, I don't know if they intended it to make you laugh, but you can't not kind of go, oh, that was dumb. But yeah, I think it's a very manic film. There's a lot of cool stuff in it. There's a lot of cringy stuff in it. I think the performances are very mixed. So like you have Judy Greer, I think is very, very good in the film. Allison's pretty good in it. I like a lot of the I like what they did with Lonnie and his son. I can't remember his name, Cameron.
Yeah.
I like them, and I think they're all good. The actor who plays Lonnie, I think, has a lot of charm to him. It's nice seeing that character's development from the dickhead little buddy in the original Halloween to this. Seems like he seems like a pretty nice dude. Seems like a good guy to go have a beer with. So I like that character development that we got like in a 40-year jump. Tommy Doyle annoys the crap out of me, but I like Lindsay. So I think I don't know. It's weird because obviously the actor who plays Tommy Doyle, what's his name again? Michael
Anthony Michael
something.
Hall.
Anthony Michael Hall. I always mix him up with the guy who played Dexter. They have similar names. Um, like he's obviously an accomplished actor. He's had a career that spanned 30 plus years. But I don't know. There's just something really goofy about him in this film that just kind of rubs me the wrong way. Um, but yeah, I find I'm gonna stop talking about kills now as I want to let Zach have his take on it. But it's a very manic film for me. There's like so many things in it where like I will like it 1 second and then the next second I'm like, oh, for fuck's sake. And I just have that internal struggle throughout the whole film. But if I was to put I think when I did my most recent rating on it, I think I gave it like 3.5. I maybe gave it 4 if I was being kind that day. I don't remember. I think in comparison to Ends, I probably ended up giving it a 4. But I definitely I have time for it. I would rewatch it happily again because it's a bit of fun. You get to watch some cool kills.
Yeah, I definitely understand because there's a lot of people who don't like Hall's portrayal of Tommy. And I went to go see the first Halloween in the big screen. It was a great moment for me. Finally got to see it on the big screen. One of the things I was thinking about as I was watching it is, you kind of take Tommy from 78 and you kind of think about him. And I actually really like how they go about that. And that's why I kind of put there's so much importance to, because I think while we look at Kills as this bridge between 2018 and Halloween Ends, I also think it's a good bridge between 78 and 18, because obviously it has the flashback sequences, which are very much complimented as they should be.
Yeah, they're amazing. Sorry, I
yeah.
should have brought that up. That's actually one of my favorite parts of the film. Those when I watched that first and I saw Donald Pleasance, I nearly teared up. It was just such
they
an
did
amazing
such a good
moment.
job.
So unexpected. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think when you look at that bridge and you see like 78 before seeing Kills, one of the things I like is it feels very natural to Tommy. Like while we think of Tommy as this sweet little boy, like from that, and I mean, he was. They kind of go into like the kind of this one incident for him where even before he's attacked by Michael Myers, he's still obsessed with the boogeyman. Like everything consumes him about the boogeyman, and it's cool to see that taken into a sense of to the extreme, because everything in Kills is pretty much taken to that extreme, very over the top in that sense. But and to me it kind of helped because I was like, I don't think Tommy's necessarily supposed to be likable. I think it's supposed to be kind of a foil to Michael in a sense, who Hawkins talks about as this mind of a 6-year-old and the body of a man and the heart of a beast, whatever, however he phrases that. And Tommy's kind of the same way. Like he's emotionally stumped as as a young boy. Like he can't get over the boogeyman. And I think that's a really interesting method for him, because it's almost like that guy you see in high school who can sit there and say he can kick anyone's ass, but in reality that's not how it goes. He puts a lot of a tough persona on because he just doesn't want to be afraid, and I think that's just kind of a cool element to go to, even though Tommy can be annoying, but I think it makes sense from what we see of him in his first appearance as well.
I like the way you're going with that. One thing I will say, as I liked Kills as well. Probably in between Adam and you, Zach. I liked it, I think, quite a bit. The only thing I don't like that they brought up in Kills and then they really spend time on in Ends is this notion that the town hates Laurie because it's like her, quote unquote, like her demon or her boogeyman. I know what they were trying to do there. I get it. I don't think they pulled it off writing wise. Like that was the only complaint. Like I think Kills was like I like the movie overall, so this is not a major detracting point for me here. But I felt like I see what they were trying to do, but maybe they didn't quite get there for me. Like it's too much vitriol directed towards this woman who I don't think that would happen in real. I think that for a series, I think that was rooted in trying to show how these characters evolve over time. that piece to me was like a bit too far.
I think, but I think part of that's also kind of the disconnect as well, right? Like for the people who didn't experience Michael Myers 40 years ago, and they kind of bring it up and end, so I won't bring it up too much, but it's like, you have like radio shock jockeys saying things like, she tempted a mentally ill man, or, of course there's going to be that idea that every single doctor that wasn't, or analyzer who wasn't Donald Pleasant's Sam Loomis would say, well, he just says, hey, he's pure evil, leave him alone, while everyone else is like, let's pick and prod at him. And in that extent, that's what everyone believes has happened to him, is that Laurie is part of that picked and prod and did this to him in a sense. Even though it's really everyone else, like his other doctor, Dr. Sartain, and you have the podcasters doing the exact same thing, not leaving well enough alone, I guess would be the way to put it.
Yeah. Yeah, I see what you're saying. I don't know. It I mean, for a horror movie, a slasher movie rooted in this borderline supernatural guy that's very difficult to kill, I guess I don't mind stretching reality a little bit. But the only reason I'm kind of reacting to it is I think like because they're rooting the premise in how people would react. I feel like maybe that writing on that particular part was a bit weak, or like I don't know. That one for me, especially knowing where ends goes, and I know we'll jump there in just a second, but I think they maybe over-indexed on that piece of it in my mind. Like the thing that was nice about Halloween was that it was this pure kind of slasher flick, and then I think as they were building out this world of Halloween Kills and the backstories for the characters and the groups, I like a lot of that, but I think as maybe part of that, I don't agree with where they took that part. I don't,
right. Do you think that they were maybe pressurized by the sort of surgence of they call it elevated horror. I think it's the stupidest term in film, but it's what it's kind of known as, elevated horror. These kind of psychologically driven horror films that have so much critical acclaim in the last few years. Do you think maybe there was pressure to have some sort of social commentary in this slasher movie? Especially considering it's Blumhouse as well, who've kind of put out a lot of these elevated horror films the last few years.
The only thing that kind of makes me hesitant to say that it could have been was just because I think that's pretty present with Green and a lot of his stuff anyway. Like he's kind of a messy director anyway. Like, and I don't say that as, an insult to him. I think he's just not the most precise director. But I think he always has something he wants to say in most of everything he does. And I think he even has that in 2018 to an extent. I would say probably maybe fits more naturally in 2018 than it does the other two, but I don't think it's unlike him in that sense.
Yeah, it just feels kind of shoehorned. I get where Chris is coming from. It doesn't feel organic. It feels very shoehorned in.
But it's actually, so to your point, and I know we have to get talking about ends here, but this was, so Halloween just had him and Danny McBride as writers, right? But then this brought in
Scott Teems.
Yeah. Scott Teems. So it's possible that he was a part of this, and then the other one, Ends, had a different team of writers. So it's hard to know, the backstory of why those writers were there, but it very well could be, Bloom or one of these, or even the Akkad family. I don't know. It could be somebody that wanted that and asked for that extra voice.
Which the first one, 2018, also has, I think his name is Jeff Fadley, I want to say is how you say his name. He was because I know Gordon Green talked about he wanted to have a different writer with him and McBride through each film.
You're right. It did have a third writer. You're right.
Yeah, and I know Ends has 4, but they brought in one of the writers who did the novelization for Kills. He was one of the writers for Ends. And I can't think of who the other guy is right off.
I always find that a really weird creative decision. I'm sorry to start going on about the Star Wars sequels again, but that was like the main problem with the Star Wars sequels, that they had different writers on each film trying to do different things and explore different themes that ended up just contradicting each other. And I think this ends up happening in this trilogy as well. There's a lot of things that are kind of incohesive throughout each film. We better kind of move on to ends. So, and this kind of ties into my point here. So we have in the end of Halloween Kills, Michael just goes on like the biggest possible rampage. It looks like he's down and out for the count, but he just ends up like killing like the entire 15-person mob that has just surrounded him with all kinds of weapons. And then Halloween Ends starts with a time jump. It jumps forward a year, the following Halloween, and then it does another time jump to another few years later. So I'm gonna just start with Halloween Ends. I'm sorry, I don't like Halloween Ends. I am one of those people. I understand what they were trying to do. I get the idea behind it. I just don't enjoy it. So I'll just kind of put a pin in it there, just as my little sort of start into this. But obviously it's a pretty new film, listeners, so if you haven't seen it, you might want to skip ahead a little while, because we are probably going to end up talking about spoilers and stuff. But obviously Halloween Ends begins with obviously introducing the character of Corey Cunningham, who accidentally kills a little asshole kid, and he just kind of becomes the town pariah. I think a lot of problems, well, maybe not all, a lot of problems. One problem that I have with Ends could have been solved by having that first scene in Halloween Ends be a tag of Halloween Kills. Do you guys understand what I mean by that? So I feel like the insertion of Corey in this last film of the trilogy and try and give him, make him a character we actually even give a shit about all in one film is just really messy writing for me.
Yeah.
And I feel like if they had at least shown this at the end of Ends, I might have been more behind it, because then I'll be kind of waiting a year to see what happens to Corey, rather than me having to try and care about this dude all in the space of 2 hours.
Well, I definitely agree to this extent of, I think enjoyment of this film is going to come down to how well you kind of can back the Corey storyline. Now, for me, I actually liked it better than the final 20 minutes. I'm way more into the Corey storyline than I thought I would be. I was very hesitant when they released the trailer, and it kind of became obvious there was going to at least be some type of copycat, because we've all seen how bad that can go, especially when you look at like Friday 13th Part 5 and things like that. That can be kind of a scary plot point to put in a slasher film. But I ended up really, really enjoying it a lot. I thought Rohan Campbell did an awesome job. I think once he is in full getup, I think he becomes a very intimidating Michael Myers, and I think they really sold that well. And he's one of those people he's, as a character, I do feel sorry for him, and you don't really want to, but he's kind of that interesting, if Tommy Doyle was kind of an emotion, like that foil in Kills, Corey is that kind of foil, because while Michael is kind of like this accidental evil, he wasn't created by anything. He just happened. He's, almost like that pure type of evil. Corey is the other end of that, where he was a nice kid who Haddonfield actually created. They created their own boogeyman. And I thought that was such a cool way to go, in that sense of, because Zombie tried really hard to explore evil is nurture, evil is created. They still do that in this film, but not at the expense of taking any mystique away from Michael Myers. It's interesting to see them in that sort of Corey using Michael to his benefit. I think that's very interesting, because, for Michael, it's knife plus a live person equals dead person. That is the extent of where his mind goes. It's not that he's stupid. It's just, that's kind of how he sees life. It's very black and white. Corey's is more of a revenge path. The people who have made his life miserable, who have kind of caused him to be who he is. And I think that's just such a cool and interesting way to go overall.
This is kind of some of my problems with it. Sorry, Chris, I didn't mean to interject.
No, go ahead.
Just while it's fresh in my mind after Zach's been talking about this. This is kind of my problem with this. I'm not one of the Corey haters. I thought the actor was very good. I actually don't have a large problem with Corey's story. I didn't mean for that to rhyme. I don't actually have a large. I don't. Yeah, I don't have a large hatred for that or anything like that. But I feel like the filmmakers had an opportunity to commit to Corey, and I felt like they just kind of bitched out of it by if you're gonna try and do like a Halloween 3 and make a Halloween movie that doesn't feature Michael as like the main antagonist, then you just need to commit to that and just not have Michael at all. I feel like by introducing Michael as this kind of weird quasi mentor, which I want to talk about the scene where Corey meets Michael as he's living in the sewers, like Pennywise the dancing clown. That there's a moment, yeah, when he meets Michael, and this is before Corey is actually like properly like killed someone, actually properly murdered somebody. There's like this moment where it's like, I don't know if it's like a psychic thing, but after that, anyway, after he meets Michael, he's like suddenly like bona fide evil, will kill anyone, anything. He just goes pure to the dark side, as they'd say in Star Wars, again, to keep bringing that up. And I don't understand why Michael doesn't just kill him. I know he's weak when he first meets him, but like there's moments later on where like you could just kill him and he doesn't. And I just don't really get where the writers were taking Michael with this. You mentioned, Friday 13th Part 5 earlier about the copycat killer. And obviously it's a lot of people groan at that reveal that it wasn't Jason the whole time. But I would have respected the writers more if they had revealed that Michael, had died of his wounds, years ago after Halloween Kills. Like maybe make it kind of ambiguous that whether it's Michael or whether it's Corey throughout the film, and then reveal that Michael's been dead the whole time and this is the new embodiment of evil in Corey. I would have respected that. Again, I may not have walked away fully satisfied, but I would have respected it more than what they did, where I feel like they just didn't fully commit to their concept. I think having both Corey and Michael, and then for some reason Michael not wanting to kill Corey until it's convenient in the last minute, it's one of those, what I was talking earlier about, these leaps in writing between the films. It just doesn't compute with everything we've seen from Michael up until now. The only people that Michael hasn't killed until this point are small defenseless children. So he doesn't kill the baby in 2018. He doesn't kill Lonnie in Kills, in the flashback. Small defenseless children are the only people we see that he doesn't kill when he has the opportunity to do so. So by having him not at least try, not try and kill Corey at some point until obviously the sort of end of the film, I don't know. It's a mental leap that I can't make, and I feel like there was a lot more potential to either, I just don't think anyone's story was done justice in this film.
Okay,
that's
so
a kind of main problem with it.
Yeah, y'all are being too civil. This movie sucks. This movie's horrible. Okay, and here's why. No offense,
I was
Zach.
trying to be nice. I was trying to be nice.
No offense, Zach. But here's my argument for why this movie is atrocious. First of all, there's that scene where he like touches him and all of a sudden he gets like the whole history of Corey. Fuck that.
Yeah,
Dumb.
that's the part I was alluding to. Just like,
Yeah.
I don't get that. I don't understand
Stupid.
what's happening at that stage.
Yeah, that's lazy writing. Like you don't put that in without any explanation or any context or any history. I think what they were probably trying to say was like he recognizes the evil in him, and so they're like gonna go have like a father-son relationship or something. But stupid. Then the whole scene where like they hate Laurie, and then one of my favorite scenes probably of any slasher movie I've ever seen is an Ends where he's up, where Michael's up on the chop block and she puts knives in his hands, and she's like the terrorizer. She's the one who's like doing the killing. I think that is on an island one of the favorite moments of any horror film I've probably seen in the last like 20, 30 years. Like I love that scene to death. But,
I hate it.
Okay, fair enough. But they take that, they put him on a car, and then all of a sudden there's a fucking like procession of people that are like walking after the car, being like, like having their moment of catharsis, and then they pass him up into the grind. Like, no, the whole ending I think is horrible. I hated it. Hated it so much. Like, there's two things you have to have in a Michael Myers movie or like a slasher movie. One of them is like a bunch of kills, which I think they generally kind of got right, even though I actually think they did a good job with the kills with Corey, because he's like although I hated the fact that he became mentored by Michael. I think that was dumb the way they did it. I do like the fact that he was like, teach me, and he was like, you could see him turning evil. I think he did a great job with that. But then the other thing you have to have is the possibility that he comes back, that Michael comes back, right? And like, there's no short of going Jason X on this franchise, like, or just doing a reboot, I guess, which they could always do. But he's done, and like I hated that because like this franchise, Jason, like they're never done, but like this was a finale. Like the Halloween series is done unless they do like a hard reboot or something.
I mean, there's been 5 timelines. They can always do a timeline. I mean,
they don't have a choice but to do a new timeline anyway, because Blumhouse, the rights have left Blumhouse. This was the last film they had the rights to do, so they don't have a choice but to reboot it again anyway.
I do want to comment on the whole. I know a lot of people were very upset with we seeing the destruction of Michael's body. I actually was really taken aback by that, and it was one of the reasons why I like sat on the movie for a bit before I really knew how I felt, because you just don't see that. Like, you don't see this complete question mark. I mean, even going back to like Halloween H2O, they decapitate him. And before they wrapped up filming, they already filmed the explanation of how he lived and the most convoluted mess you've ever seen.
Yeah.
And I really respected them sitting there. They had his mask off. There was no question mark. This isn't going to be, it lives up to that name. Like, I mean, it's weird seeing, complete destruction of Michael. And I think that is a tough pill to swallow, but I also think it's a necessary jump that a filmmaker should make if they're trying to have a complete trilogy of something.
Like,
I'm not sitting.
This comes back to what I was mentioning earlier, though, about the ending of 2018. If we're talking about, like, they had to have the last 20 minutes of this film had to happen because they have to give Laurie a cathartic ending with Michael. My problem is the ending of 2018 is better than the ending of Halloween Ends.
I'll disagree there, just because, like, I like the ending of 2018, but I mean, we also don't see Michael die. Like, we actually see that he's lived at the end. Like, when they pan back to like the basement on fire, he's nowhere to be seen. So
but that's what's great about it, because he's the shape. That's what's so it's like the original. It's like 1978. It's just, it's ambiguous. That's what I love about it. Whereas this is just like, oh, he's gone, meat grinder, okay.
And just real quick on this, the other thing just that I didn't like about it, the ending, was they set up Laurie having like some type of like Harry Potter and Voldemort type connection to Michael Myers. Like, that was the premise, right? Like he lives because of her, or there's like some connection that doesn't go fully explained, but like they kind of encourage each other. So I wanted to see her go in the meat grinder too. Like if you're gonna kill Michael,
I would have been so pissed. I would have been.
That would have really pissed people off.
It would have pissed me off. I was like, why did we even come back? We're just gonna get to see Laurie completely decimated.
Yeah, people would have been so pissed.
I'm just saying that they set it up in a way where like they should have both died, or like because there was like some connection there or something like that. So I didn't like the fact that she lived and he was the one that died.
What annoyed me, though, is how easy it was for her to kill him. Like,
was it easy? I wouldn't consider that easy.
Well, no, it happens in like 5 minutes.
But I mean, look what she has to do. She has to stab him with 3 different knives, throw a refrigerator on top of him, slit his throat, slit his wrist, and he still rips his hand out from the knife, and then has his arm broken over. Like, I would consider it easy.
It's easier than the fact that in Kills he was surrounded by 15 able-bodied people with weapons who couldn't put him down. I know it's 4 years later, and this idea that he is this kind of idea like he's a vampire where he needs to feed on blood to be powerful or whatever the fuck they were trying to imply.
Well, I mean, that was
when he does that weird shuddering when he kills the cop and he does that weird shudder. I was like, what the fuck is happening? Why does it look?
I kind of like that, because I thought that was kind of the ambiguous nature of it, right? Like that could be adrenaline, or that could be what they talked about in Kills, of that idea, is he supernatural or not? I like
I really don't know. I think we kind of have to wrap this segment up, so we'll all give our final one-liner on the trilogy. So my one-liner is, I like Halloween 2018. It's a serviceable sequel. Kills is fine. Ends just feels like a film of missed opportunities. I feel like they would have had the balls to go one way or the other with it. Overall, the trilogy is just very messy. That's the only way I can. That's my one liner. Messy trilogy for me.
Just because Zach, I value your opinion more than any of ours on horror films. So I'll just go quickly, and then I'd like to hear you give the right answer here. But for me, I think Halloween and Halloween Kills are a nice companion piece, and I think they work well. Halloween Ends, you could talk about missed opportunities. I kind of want to go along that. Like, I think Halloween Ends had my favorite scene, but I do think the scene where Laurie gets to finally kill Michael, but we see how hard it is. It's very important to see that. I love that scene. And I loved components of what they did with Corey. And I think they just completely missed on the overall storytelling around it. And so that movie sucks. And I think history will not be kind to Halloween Ends. Although it will have its fans, as we're about to hear.
I'm on the other end. I think Ends will absolutely build a fan base over time. I think I think it was very much intended to be the Halloween 3. I think there's been a lot of love for Halloween 3 throughout this trilogy. It's why I respect the hell out of it, because Halloween 3 is great. But I think that's kind of the thing that all we can do at this point when it comes to Green's trilogy is kind of see what it is. For me, it was Halloween's my favorite horror series. I love it. I love every timeline to some extent. But I think this one's connected to me a lot, and it's kind of what I've always wanted out of Halloween sequels, and I'll be curious to see how they are, because I do like a lot of the risks David Gordon Green took. I think it was nice having somewhat of a thought out trilogy for a subgenre that's usually we'll go by the seat of our pants and see what happens next. So I thought that was super cool. I'm really happy for that, and hey, it's not going to be for everyone, but for me, that usually means that they did something interesting, and I'm all for it. So, I think that'll sum it up for me.
So, thank you for listening to what ended up being a stirring debate on the recent Halloween sort of sequel trilogy. You might remember we were talking about witches at some point, so we're going to get back to that. The second film in our lineup, our official sort of double feature lineup, was a film made in 1957 by Jacques Tourneur, who is an incredible horror director. I mentioned 3 of his films in that Halloween recommendations episode that I did a couple of weeks ago. This is one that he made away from Val Lewton, who was his he was a producer who worked with a lot during those earlier horror films. This is one he made called Night of the Demon. It was called Curse of the Demon, I believe, in its US release. But I'll give you the breakdown that Letterboxd has. It's a little bit lengthier than I thought it would be. But American professor John Holden arrives in London for a press conference on parapsychology, only to discover that a colleague he was supposed to meet was killed in a freak accident the day before. It turns out that the deceased had been investigating a cult led by Dr. Julian Carswell. Though a skeptic, Holden is suspicious of the devil-worshipping Carswell, but following a trail of mysterious manuscripts, Holden enters a world that will make him question his faith in science. So yeah, it's a bit wordy, but yeah, this was my second time watching Night of the Demon. I didn't love it the first time around, but I liked it a lot more this time. More because I honed in on the noirish aspects that we talked about a little bit earlier when we were talking about City of the Dead. Really, it should have been a lot more obvious to me how noirish this was, because it stars Dana Andrews, who obviously was in Double Indemnity, co-stars Peggy Cummins, who was in Gun Crazy, so it has noir actors in it. And it's by Jacques Tourneur, who, although more well known for his horror films, he did make some film noirs as well, Nightfall being probably the most sort of well known out of those. But again, Zach, I can't remember. Yeah, no, you had definitely seen Night of the Demon before, because I think we had talked about it previously on the podcast many moons ago. So, Chris, I'm once again going to go to you for your initial sort of thoughts on Night of the Demon.
All right, cool. So let me just quickly say this film is universally beloved. So They Shoot Zombies has it as the 66th best horror film of all time.
Wow. Okay.
and they shoot pictures have it well in the top 1,000 at 740. So I think that I'm assuming this is going to be a love fest. I understand why it's rated so high. I think one of the things I've only seen a few movies by Jacques Tournier. I need to see a lot of the ones he's famous for. Um, but he's an incredible technical director. Like he's a great storyteller. Really knows how to put together a movie. And I think that's all on display here. I think like this is a good movie. I love. You talked about that nostalgia feeling earlier. We kind of got into that, like why certain movies feel good around Halloween season.
Mm-hmm.
I immediately can kind of get behind when they build. I don't know if it's stop motion or however they did the effects for the monster here, the demon here.
Yeah, it looks like it was probably stop motion. I think they originally wanted your man Ray Harryhausen to do it, but he was unavailable because he's doing a Sinbad movie.
Okay, I was gonna say it feels very Harryhausen, right? And I'm a sucker for that kind of stuff. I like it. So this movie for me was a big hit. I'm sure we'll get into a lot of the reasons why here in a moment. But what about y'all?
I just really like Tournier. That's how you say his name, right? Am I wrong?
Yeah, I think he's American. So yeah, Tournier. That's what I would say.
I really like him. I think it's fascinating, like how much of the stuff he did was almost like a basis of stuff. Like, I Walk with a Zombie. Obviously, that's more hoodoo, voodoo type zombie stuff. But I mean, that he's a very early example of that. The Leopard Man, such an early example of slashers. Cat People is great. Just a super talented guy, and I think one that's just stupidly underappreciated, like even in horror circles, of how great he was and how formative he was. He's kind of like James Whale. Like I think James Whale, while gets a decent amount of appreciation, it's still way under what he deserves when it comes to like foundation of horror.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, Whale and Tournier are sort of like the early auteurs of horror.
And and with like you look at Night of the Demon, it has. I don't know if this comparison is going to make sense, but the whole time I watch it, I think of Nightmare Alley. Like I guess it's that noirish kind of like superstition type thing, like kind of seeing that. And the villain for the film, who I can't think of his name right now, the main villain of the film is so great. He's awesome. He eats a lot of scenery, and it's just fun to watch.
Yeah, Carswell, the cult leader. It's really good.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, it's just to sort of piggyback on what both you guys are saying. It's just a really well made film. It's really well put together. It has a tight, cohesive story. There's just a lot of things to love about this film. The cast is obviously great. There's one thing in this film that I absolutely, utterly despise. This is like a 10 out of 10 movie, apart from this one aspect of it. And it's the fact that they showed the demon in like the first 2 minutes of the film. And I know the Tournier hated this as well. I think I actually read when I was doing my research that he didn't want the demon showed at all. And he even said that any scene where you've seen the demon, I wasn't there. That wasn't me. I didn't want to show the demon at all. He wanted to be much more ambiguous. And I think it kind of hurts the film a little bit. The reason the producer of this film wasn't Val Lewton would have never shown this demon either, as we saw in Cat People and Leopard Man. He very much also agreed with Tournier in terms of not showing the villain straight up, at least until the end of the picture. But the producer of this film was a British guy. I can't remember his name, something Chester. But his idea was that if we showed the demon early on, it would create suspense because we would know everything is real, but Dana Andrews' character wouldn't believe it was real. And I think it actually does the opposite, because this film is such a great, it has great themes of like, faith versus science, believing and non-believing, all that kind of stuff. And I think showing the demon at the start kind of takes away a lot of that suspense. I think if they left it more ambiguous by not showing the demon straight up, kind of like how they did when Dana Andrews' character gets chased by the demon through the woods, but we don't actually see the demon, it's just smoke. A lot of the things that happen up until the very end of the picture, when Carswell himself becomes victim to the demon, a lot of the stuff leading up to that, Dana Andrews' character tries to make a logical explanation, and he succeeds like 99% of the time. So I feel the fact that they showed the demon so early in the film, right at the very start, it kills the suspense. And if they didn't show that, if they made it more ambiguous throughout the whole film, I think those themes of like faith versus science and believing and non-believing, it would have been, I just think it would have been a much better way to show off those themes, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Zach.
I was going to say, yeah, the kind of the issue you have, because I actually don't have issues with them showing it at the end. Actually, like,
yeah, I agree.
I don't like what you say the first couple minutes, because it kind of makes him feel like an idiot. He's not, because he's making rational points, but in the audience, I'm like, well, he's an idiot because he's wrong.
Yeah, exactly. It really undermines his character the whole way through.
If you don't show the monster early, then this becomes almost like a shock corridor type of movie. You know, that Sam Fuller movie from a few years later,
Yeah,
where you're trying to figure out what's real the whole time, right? Like you're wrestling with that as the audience. If that's left open, it's probably a better movie, right?
I would think so. I would have no problem giving this like 5 stars, whatever, if it had just allowed for some ambiguity. That's a huge thing in horror kind of recently in the last sort of 20 or so years, allowing horror to be a bit more ambiguous. And I think if they had done it here, if they had the foresight to do it, and I think if Val Lewton had produced it, then that would have been the case as well. I think we would have been looking, like, we'd be talking about Night of the Demon as one of like the all-time great movies. I know it's obviously still very highly regarded as it is, as you mentioned, Chris, but I think it would be even more acclaimed if they had allowed it to be a bit more psychologically driven as it is. Because as Zach says, it just kind of makes Dane Andrews' character look a bit stupid the whole way, even though he's making rational, logical, scientific choices throughout this movie. Everything he says, all the sort of things that happen, can be coincidence, or the way the paper tries to escape from him. Oh, well, it's clearly just the wind. The window's open. Oh, it's going up the chimney. It's obviously a draft from the chimney. He makes logical, clear decisions the whole way through the movie, but then we are the audience are like, okay, just show us the demon.
Yeah, that's true. There's an interesting thing. We talked about 1960, 1957. I can almost see where the producer's coming from. Can I just read off like 10 titles real quick? So, yeah. The Abominable Snowman, Attack of the Crab Monsters, The Aztec Mummy, The Black Scorpion, Blood of Dracula, Curse of Frankenstein, The Cyclops, From Hell It Came, Ghost Cat of Yonaki Swamp. That's a little bit different. That's a Japanese one. But I Was a Teenage Frankenstein. I Was a Teenage Werewolf. Incredible Shrinking Man. There's more, but my point is like this is the environment that this movie came out in, right? So it's almost like I can almost understand because producers are not the creative people typically. That's not what they're known for. So I can almost feel them. I can sense them like feeling a pressure to have this kind of tap into what people were expecting to see in some of these movies, right?
Yeah, you're there to see the creature. That was kind of a big part of the 50s, like your atomic monsters and stuff like that. You want to feel like the audience got something out of it, not left with it. What the hell was that?
Right.
Yeah, right. The psychological stuff didn't really come in, I suppose, until the 60s, right? So like we're talking about, like The Innocents. I think that was like early 60s.
Yeah, I think that was 1960.
That's a film that plays on ambiguity a lot and lets the audience make a lot of decisions for themselves. Whereas Night of the Demon, that decision making is taken out of your hands in the first 2 minutes. You're not allowed to have an opinion as to whether it's real or not. Whereas maybe, into the 60s, and obviously it's very prevalent now, but with The Innocents and The Haunting as well. I don't remember what year The Haunting was. The adaptation of the Haunting of Hill House.
I'm actually just pulling out my Blu-ray. I can tell you right now.
I think it was 67, but that could be wrong.
God, I hate the way they design the backs of stuff. 63.
63. Okay, so yeah, a little bit after The Innocents. So these are films that allow the audience to try and make some decisions for themselves, whereas Night of the Demon is a psychological horror film masquerading as a monster movie. If they didn't, if they weren't so hammed up on, if the producer wasn't so hammed up on wanting this to be kind of creature feature monster movie, show the monster, show the demon, blah, 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 this could have been one of the sort of great early psychological horror films.
I do want to at least give the credit where it's due, because I don't disagree with you in many ways. The demon effect is super cool. Super well done. I love it. I get so annoyed with a lot of like demon movies now where it's just a person, speaking in tongues or whatever. Obviously, it's very Exorcist in that sense. It's kind of nice to see like a physical embodiment of something like that. Like it's super cool.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And it's like what you said earlier. Like, I would have no problem if they showed the demon at the very end. I know Turnier didn't want to show it at all, but I can live with it just being at the very end because it's a really cool moment at the end when the demon is revealed at the train and stuff like that. That's a cool moment. I like that. I could just do without it not being there in the first 2 minutes. It's like, yeah, it just feels like they just threw all their cards on the table. They just shown you their hand as it was dealt, and now it's just all the suspense is kind of gone for the rest of the movie. You're just kind of waiting for the demon to show up again, and what happens in between, because you only see the demon, if I remember correctly, we only see it at the very start and the very end.
Yeah,
obviously we see the smoke kind of midway through, but at the very start it's bookended by the demon appearance. So in the middle of that, there's this great psychological horror film, and a great film noir as well, in a sense, as we kind of spoke about. There's a lot of noirish elements in this film. So we have this really great movie either side of this. I feel like if they just cut out the first part or edit the first part so it doesn't actually show the demon, just shows the dude kind of running away and hitting into the telephone pole, whatever it was, electricity pole, and that it's such a small edit, but I just feel it would change the entire film in a really positive way.
Yeah, and it kind of sucks to kind of feel harped on that one point because overall it's a really, really, really good movie. Like,
great movie. Yeah, for sure. 4.5 stars what I gave it this time around on Letterboxd. It's literally it's just that one small segment that's stopping it from being a 5-star film in my eyes anyway.
And I wonder, because this was kind of late in his filmography, because I mean he started making in like the 20s and 30s. I mean he'd been around forever. I wonder if how this does it, because I don't know what the consensus was when it released. For some reason, I just kind of get a feeling it wasn't beloved when it released. That kind of came later. I'm not sure about that, but I almost always wonder how that kind of stuff messes with their legacy too, because his legacy is really cat people, which is unfortunate because I think of his horror films, it's one of his weakest ones. As much as I like cat people.
Starting out of the past is still regarded one of the best film noirs.
Yeah.
So this is like, he has a lot of good films, and I agree. Like, out of the 3 he made in a row, Cat People, Leopard Man, and I Walked with a Zombie, Cat People is my least favorite of those 3 as well. Still a great film, obviously, but
yeah, the remake. The remake with Paul Schrader's remake is actually pretty decent too.
I haven't seen it. I know it's on the channel at the moment. They've 80s horror, and I know it's on the channel, but I haven't actually seen it.
There's something that I'm glad we brought up James Well earlier, because there's something that I was going to ask you all about, kind of tied to that. Because we just saw Frankenstein recently, and I think that we talk about them as auteurs of horror. There's another angle here I want to just kind of ask you all about. So I feel like we talk about quote unquote B movies now, right? And that term obviously came from the back half of a double feature, right? Like the B movie for a double feature, the movie that people didn't necessarily go to see. And I think a part of that, because there wasn't so much pressure around it, they took more risks and there was more campy stuff, more that's typically where you have like the more riskier plot points and crazier monsters and stuff. But I feel like James Well and then Tournier both were kind of making these like B movies, these kind of campy films, but they were very much beloved and like in the mainstream. I'm just curious how if y'all are picking up on this at all, or if this is just me editorializing, but I feel like there was a time in movie history where we didn't really have this separation, and like, these movies with these crazy plot points were coming out as just sort of standard affair. Like I don't think they were viewed differently.
Yeah, no, well, like James Whale basically invented camp with The Old Dark House. In terms of like camp horror, that's like,
that movie's so great.
It's so good. I hated it when I first watched it, and then I watched it again and thought it was amazing. It's so funny. He basically invented camp horror with that film. I see less campness with Tournier's films, if I'm being honest. I think they do have.
He plays it pretty straight, honestly.
Yeah, I think they have pretty serious undertones. Like even a lot of his films have kind of maybe silly maybe sort of silly sort of base plots, but I think the films themselves are pretty played straight. Like Cat People, for example, it's a pretty silly story, but it's played straight, has some really effective moments in it. But I agree in terms of what you're saying regarding different types of movies coming out. But yeah, I can't really put a pin to say, what would have made a film a B movie and what would have made a film an A movie. I assume it was just down to star power. At this point, Ternier was as far as I'm aware, he was well regarded. He worked a lot, so they made him the A picture, whereas the B pictures were more for the people who are just getting into the business, if that makes sense. Now, saying that, Peggy Cumming, who plays the female lead in this film, her most well-known film is Gun Crazy, which is definitely a B picture. It's a great B picture, really good film noir. I don't know if you guys have seen it. So that's not to say there's definitely not overlap between the A and the B. Maybe these kind of films kind of sit in the middle in that sense, where it's not like a straightforward monster movie, some of the ones that were coming out, like I can't remember the titles of them, the ones like the giant bugs and all that kind of stuff in the 50s, like the Blob or something, like that. It wasn't like a straight monster movie. They wanted to make something a bit more psychologically driven, it's kind of like a monster movie mixed with, like, to put both yours and Zach's kind of analogies together, it's kind of like a monster movie mixed with Nightmare Alley, that kind of psychological pseudo supernatural noir mixed with a monster movie to kind of create something that's completely stands on its own 2 feet, that you can't really make the A picture, you can't really make it a B picture either because of the star power involved with Dana Andrews. So it just becomes this little outlier and this kind of film that kind of stands out from the crowd of everything else that was kind of coming out around it, if that makes sense.
I think that's a good summary. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. How does Michael Myers fit into this universe?
This is part of the Season of the Witch universe, actually. So
there you go.
I believe Carswell was related to the Irish witch in Season of the Witch.
I mean, they both use Stonehenge.
Yeah,
Power.
That's okay. That you've heard it here first, folks. Night of the Demon and Halloween 3 Season of the Witch are in the same timeline.
Well, now that we've established some amazing connections in horror movie history, it's time to move on, I think, and talk about what we're going to be watching next. So, I know that November is coming up, and if I didn't pick a noir theme, I'd have to hear about it the whole month. So I from Adam, so I didn't want to do that, even though Adam snuck in 2 noir films in the horror month. Out of respect for you, I still wanted to think of a noir theme. And I was just thinking about how to make it interesting. And I kind of, under that whole premise of, I mean, it's become a cheesy thing to say now, but be the change you want to see kind of thing. I decided let's pick some noir films that maybe are less discussed. And I was trying to think of how to get there. And then I had this idea to find some noir films that are directed by women, because there's not a lot of them. And so I thought it'd be kind of fun to do that as a theme. And as I started to dig around, 2 really popped up. So one of my favorite movies, I don't know exactly where it falls in my top 100. I'll find out again as I watch it again. But Mikey and Nikki from Elaine May, just having Columbo and John Cassavetes chew scenery for 90 minutes or whatever it is just awesome. Like, I love that movie. So I wanted to do that. That's going to be one of them. And then the other one is a movie that I have not seen, but I'm excited to. I've been hearing about it for years. It's Ida Lupino's The Hitchhiker from 1953.
Great movie.
Great. I can't wait to. I'm glad you've seen it. Zach, have you seen either one of these?
I have not.
Okay, cool. So if y'all give the thumbs up, I think those are the 2 I want to nominate for what we see next.
Yeah, sounds good. I look forward to rewatching The Hitchhiker. I think it's only just over an hour long, but so much happens, and the villain's performance, like one of the best performances in film history. So I'm looking forward to rewatching it. It's a great film. I haven't seen the other one, but I've heard of it. So look forward to watching that as well.
Elaine May is just one of these. She comes from a comedy background, and she's just so clever with dialogue. So I think I'm interested to see how y'all react to that. But yeah, there we go. A fun episode, y'all. I hope we're still friends. I hope this the disagreement didn't end the podcast. I appreciate y'all's takes, even when they're wrong.